This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jespersen.
Well, if you're watching us live on YouTube or, for that matter, LinkedIn, Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, what's up, everybody streaming us live on Mixlr, courtesy of California Closets. You just heard or seen we call it the Real Talk pre-roll, and these are the 5 most recent shorts, the real quick clips, the highlights of most recent shows. And boy, were Ken Bosencool and Shannon Phillips ever all fired up about the carbon tax. Johnny jumping in on that one as well. A great conversation. If you're not aware, for every Friday through the election campaign, we've been hanging out with the team from Meredith Bosencool and Phillips, the policy firm, to get kind of a bipartisan view of the news headlines. Ken, longtime conservative strategist. Shannon, obviously a Rachel Notley cabinet minister in her previous political life. Tyler Meredith, the third leg of their stool, is actually working on the Liberal campaign right now, so he's not doing media, but it's been a great service. Wanted to let you know that the two of them will be joining us on Thursday. That's going to be 2 episodes from now, considering the Easter long weekend. A shout out to everybody who's going to be traveling through Easter long weekend. I know for a lot of you, the more politically engaged, you're not going to be traveling unless it's to a riding where your party needs your help. You're going to be mobilizing. You're going to be knocking on doors. This is crunch time. We are now less than 2 weeks away from the federal election. Vicky Mochama, in just a moment, she's going to join us. She's back from Milan, Italy, where she checked in last, the host of Party All the Time, the newest national political podcast that you absolutely have to add to your subscribers list. But everybody is pedal to the metal right now, trying to make sure that their party wins, or at least that their party wins the most seats possible, depending on who you're working for, depending on who you're volunteering for. If you work for the Carney Liberals right now, your team is part of easily the most entertaining story of the week when it comes to Canada's election. But depending on your political wiring, you either find it probably funny, despicable, or maybe just in poor judgment. We'll lead with Buttongate today because it's a fun one to talk about. Then we'll get into the more serious stuff. Pierre Poilievre says that he'll use the notwithstanding clause to crack down on crime. He's calling it his crime crackdown. Of course, he's got a catchy title to it, but is it the right move in dealing with dangerous offenders in Canada? Plus, other news of the day as it develops. We've got you covered here on this episode of Real Talk that is happening with the presenting sponsorship of Alberta's top online real estate school. That's Rello, where better real estate training starts. If you're in the province of Alberta and you're thinking of maybe shaking up your career a little bit, giving it a shot in the arm, maybe it's time to look into a career in commercial or residential real estate. There's the right way, and there are many wrong ways to start a real estate career. The right way, we'll save you some time here, we'll save you some money, is to start with the team at Rello. Online learning for the bold and ambitious. The only real estate school that sets you up with a professional practice network and professional development webinars to make sure that you know what you're doing, you ace your exam, you get your license, and you hit the ground running when you're set to launch your practice. You get the best of both worlds with Rello, a fundamentals course and a practical course. You can get the details on their website. And don't forget, if you're signing up for the Alberta commercial or residential real estate bundles, use that promo code Ryan100 to knock $100 off. Save yourself some money at rello.ca. All right, this is a story I chuckled when I first saw it, but I can understand why conservatives think it was a brutal attempt to misportray them, and the Conservatives think that it was, nailing their feet to the floor and screwing them over. It's a self-own, a self-inflicted wound. It's Buttongate. Let's get into the details first, but let's say hello to Vicky Mochama. She's the host of Party All the Time. She typically joins us from her home in Ontario, but it was Italy last week. You're now back at home, a lot of travel. How was your last week? How was the week in Milan?
It was glorious. Nothing better than scrolling Liberal Party drama from a patio in the middle of Italy. It's gorgeous. Couldn't have had a better time.
When you host a national political podcast, you can't take like 6 days off and just hit like Italian wine and pizza or whatever they're eating over there. I guess you got to stay plugged in more than the average
Yeah,
person.
I have a personal beef to pick with Mark Carney for dropping a election in the middle of my vacation, but we'll wait to see what the results are before I really go after him.
Yeah, Mark Carney's a little bit pissed off right now. This whole Buttongate story. For folks that don't know, this is the typically known as the Manning Conference, but they've changed their name now. It's an annual conservative conference now known as the Canada Strong and Free Networking Conference. Two Liberal staffers snuck in there, I guess, or at least maybe misportrayed their involvement there and ended up dropping off campaign buttons, leaving them all over the venue for people to pick up. But here's the deal. Obviously unauthorized buttons, one of them tapping into some perceived or very real dissent within the ranks. Jenny Byrne has been orchestrating Pierre Poilievre's rise to the party leadership and ultimately his big lead in the polls out of the gates. Corey Teneycke, former Harper guy, was the one that spoke out with pretty loaded language, talking about how unless they changed course, this campaign was going to be screwed and they were going to lose the election. So the one button, for people that haven't seen it, has Jenny Byrne's name crossed out, Corey Teneycke's name there in a big maple leaf. The other one, reminiscent of Donald Trump's campaign in 2020, Stop the Steal buttons. Leaving these all over the venue at the Manning Conference, obviously leading people to believe, or hoping to lead people to believe, that these were conservatives leading these buttons around. Turns out they couldn't stop running their mouths at a pub later in front of a journalist, and they got busted. More on that in a bit, but your initial thoughts on Buttongate?
I think Buttongate is just the cutest name a Canadian political scandal could have. That
Isn't
was
it?
my first thought. It's adorable.
I didn't see Buttongate, by the way, in the news, so I don't know if we get to take credit for it. I think we might.
Oh, you should. You absolutely should.
Mm-hmm.
My first thought was really like, these are the sort of small, usually like riding level hijinks you might see. A volunteer gets overzealous, takes down a sign. That's never appropriate, but like these are supposed to be like, high level political operatives. And it struck me as a bit clownish.
Yeah, maybe more than a bit clownish. Mark Carney obviously asked about it. This is something that quite frankly looks really bad, and so he's doing everything he can to kind of distance himself from it. And as crisis managers will tell you, the best thing to do in a situation like this typically is tell the truth. And well, here's Mark Carney's version of it.
Good morning, Kate McKenna from the CBC.
Hi.
Members of the Liberal War Room, so the Central Campaign, distributed Stop the Steal buttons at a Conservative event. Given the anti-democratic implications of this phrase, how much does this event undermine the trust in the way that the Liberals operate, and what have you done in response to these revelations?
Thanks for the question. Look, this is totally unacceptable, to be absolutely clear. And I, on behalf of my campaign, I was unaware of this behavior, but on behalf of my campaign, I apologize for it unreservedly. Okay. I've made it absolutely clear to my campaign that this behavior or anything approximating it or in that spirit is unacceptable, cannot happen again. Responsible people for this issue have been reassigned within the campaign.
Okay, so there's Mark Carney. He condemns it. He knew nothing about it, and the people responsible have been reassigned in the campaign. If you Google in Canada today, buttons, and that's it. You just Google buttons and you hit news. This is the whole first few pages of the returns. This story will be gone in 2 days, but that doesn't mean it's not, as it's described in the Toronto Star today, a colossal self-own. How bad is it, do you think?
I don't think it's catastrophic to the campaign or the polling lead that Mark Carney enjoys, but I do think for the Conservatives, it's a strong message where they can point at, look, it's more of the sort of kind of same liberal arrogance and unseriousness that we've seen and that they've been kind of pointing at and gesturing at over the last decade. So when they talk about things like the lost liberal decade, this is just like another little, pinpoint in that particular attack. And so I think it has resonance, is what I'm seeing with the people who are sharing it.
Do you think that stuff like this happens? I mean, on one hand, like I can see this in two ways. Okay. And number one is like, this is silly. I can understand why people would be like giggling and thinking this is super funny and pulling it off. Like when they're doing it, it's like a prank. They can't wait to see people wearing the buttons. They're going to get some photo ops of Conservatives wearing the buttons. It's going to allow them to draw a more direct line between Pierre Poilievre and Donald Trump. Like there's obviously some strategy to it. It's also very risky. And it certainly creates questions like, around integrity and all the way to the top. Like, I'm surprised, number one, the staffers have been reassigned and not fired, to be honest with you. I think it's way easier to fire them. It's not like the chief strategist did this. It's not like the campaign manager did it. I would fire them just for the headline if I fired them. But I don't know. I wonder how the average Canadian voter feels about it. I think obviously conservatives probably feel differently about it than liberals do. And then I bet there's a bunch of people that really don't care and quite frankly will never hear the story in the first place.
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of strength to the idea that a lot of people just won't catch it in the back and forth of all the big news that's happening, both related to and not related to the election. But I do think there's something kind of interesting about this charge that they are trying, that these staffers were trying to level, and they were trying to use, kind of level it from within the party. It hasn't really worked in Canadian political history thus far, especially in the last couple of years, to point at conservatives or whoever and say this is American style politics. I wonder if this time it could work. I wonder if there's something to that attack simply because Canada is in a fraught relationship at the moment with our southern partner in the United States. They're trying to pick up on momentum with this particular attack, but I haven't seen that it has ever worked. When Kathleen Wynne pointed to Doug Ford and said, this is Trump-style politics, we saw what happened to her. It doesn't really resonate for the public because they're more concerned with day-to-day living and affordability issues and the cost of housing and the danger that the American president poses, but not that our particular parties are reflective of that culture. So I'm curious if it sticks. I wonder, even the idea that it's coming from the Liberal Party, if they're thinking like this, they're maybe not reading the tea leaves appropriately.
Huh. Yeah, it turns out that the whole story broke. I don't know if most people know this, but there was like a CBC politics reporter at an Ottawa pub, and then a bunch of Liberal staffers near them. Did you hear this? And they're just like having drinks and celebrating, just having a great time. And one of the people who did it, who dropped the buttons, is like laughing and telling the story. And the politics reporter is just sitting there like, and I guess they approached the staffer later and said, like, FYI, I'm going to report on this. So, what are the details? The staffer then denies it, but the CBC runs with the story, which is obviously true. Ever been in a situation like that where a hot scoop just lands in your lap? Somebody has no idea who's sitting next to them in an Ottawa watering hole. The next thing you know, you're leading the headlines.
I wish I went to school in Ottawa, and if I picked up on every piece of gossip that a young staffer just casually mentioned, I think I would have a better career. I'd be sat alongside Stephen Chase at the Globe and Mail. But I have a policy about, like, if people have been drinking, I'm very careful about how much of their coverage I take on. Especially if they're young. And so this one's different. This is in the middle of an election. It raises questions of integrity and questions of leadership. And that's when, I think that's the balance that the reporting is striking. They're not naming the staffer, which is like, an argument can be made that they should be named. In previous cases where there was a violation of the law, that staffer was named, right? So it's a fine balance. There's the ha-ha funny part of it, which is just like, watch who you're gossiping to, and especially in Ottawa. You never know who's listening. You never know who's around. But, there's the serious part about, like, what does it mean that parts of the party, especially maybe it's younger staffers, are doing shenanigans like this, and who is making sure that they aren't?
It's got to be young staffers. If it's not young staffers, then you're like, what are you doing? Like, if it's like some 50-year-old that's in there dropping these buttons.
Yeah, like if Katie Telford's like, haha, guess what I did at the Manning conference this week, then you got a lot of questions.
But I don't know that
it doesn't seem to be that. It doesn't seem like that's the case.
I don't know that Katie Telford's flying under the radar at the Manning conference. If she walks into there, I don't know that that's happening. On our live chat, maybe
if she had a backwards baseball hat.
Yeah, glasses, fake mustache. Dubious in our live chat, powered by Park Power, says, who fucking cares? Aaron says, this is so dumb to do. Why would you do this? M8 says it's a non-story. I think people have too much time on their hands if this bugs them. Kenzie says, yeah, it is silly, but when people are hysterically blaming Pierre Poilievre for being like Trump, you can imagine that hay that would have been made with this story. And to be quite honest with you, I kind of side with Kenzie on this. I think that, whether or not your political beliefs align with Preston Manning or people that are at this conference or whatever, I also recognize that politics is a filthy, nasty, dirty game. People's knives out are all the time. literally, friends, like real talkers, I think you know this already because if you listen to this show, you're already whip smart. But like, you cannot trust anybody at any time. And that includes a healthy cynicism that talk show hosts and podcast hosts must maintain as well. Politics is gnarly and greasy and vindictive, and people have long memories. And this is all part of the game. I just think that like planting the buttons to draw it, like the stop the steal button especially. I think the Jenny Byrne, Corey Tonight one's kind of funny anyway because political parties and typically movements, I'm talking about party members too, rarely have a problem just jettisoning somebody, dropping them off at the train station when they've like fulfilled their purpose to the party. So the indicator there that maybe there's some dissent within the ranks on who's calling the shots is kind of entertaining to me and interesting. The stop the steal ones, I don't know. That just it honestly feels like tampering. And while someone, I think Kyle in our chat is saying it's illegal, I don't actually know that it's illegal. I don't know what law that's breaking. I doubt it. Maybe it's some sort of election law. I'm not sure, but it's not like these are at the polls. But now I feel like, we don't want to get in the weeds. I just feel like generally speaking, it's a really tough look. It's an attempt to misportray the conference. It's an attempt to misportray conservatives, and it's not worth it. Right? Anything that blows up in your face that you didn't have to do that could even lead to a 1 or 2 or 3 point drop in the polls, why would you do it 2 weeks out?
Yeah, it also, like I said, it sort of swipes this argument, this line of attack from the Liberals. It's very hard for them to now say, oh, Pierre Poilievre is echoing MAGA politics, which is sort of like a line of argumentation that comes more from the Chrystia Freeland camp of thinking. But should they need to pivot based on what Trump does, it's harder to level this accusation and for it to feel true when the public has now been introduced to a certain amount of insincerity and fraudulence. I mean that lowercase f, not capital F with the law around it. So like, I think it is significant in terms of party strategy, not necessarily in terms of the daily news cycle.
Yeah, no kidding. Pierre Poilievre, just less than a day ago, actually, promising to use Section 33, the notwithstanding clause. Anytime this pops up in Canada, it raises eyebrows. We've heard it on the prairies. Ralph Klein used it to talk about gay marriage. Doug Ford's been talking about it. Scott Moe, obviously. But Poilievre says that to impose consecutive life sentences on multiple murders, he will use the notwithstanding clause. The Supreme Court of Canada about 3 years ago ruling that imposing consecutive life sentences violates an offender's charter rights. So there are some concerns. Some are saying that this may sort of violate the spirit of the charter, but Pierre Poilievre telling Canadians just hours ago exactly why this is a big part of his plan.
Merci, on passe à la prochaine question.
The question was, will you use it for other things? And the answer is, we will only use Section 33 to fight crime. We will only use it to end the liberal crime wave, which they have unleashed with catch and release hug-a-thug laws. We will reverse all of those laws, and we will bring in the biggest crime crackdown in Canadian history to protect the constitutional charter rights of Canadians to life, liberty, and security of the person.
Merci. On passe à la dernière question.
Hi, Mr. Poilievre.
I should just say one last thing, because after the lost Liberal decade of skyrocketing crime and costs of living, we cannot afford a fourth term. We need a change with a new Conservative government so you can have food that you afford, homes you can afford, streets that you're safe on, and a paycheck that grows faster than your cost of living. Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Poilievre.
So he kind of gets in his, his key points, his main
when
points.
A mass murderer has been set free, does the parole board not usually rule against that?
Well, the problem is that the ruling just happened in 2022. So the clock started ticking on these cases in that year. So what we will see is 25 years forward, these offenders will be eligible for parole. And it should, when you kill 6 people, you should never be eligible for parole. You should never be able to force the families of the victims to have to come and testify at a parole hearing so that they relive the hell that you've exacted on them. This This is completely obvious.
Yeah, so Pierre Poilievre obviously feeling strongly about this, and he goes on to talk about what's sort of justifying the position he's taking. Conservative leaders in past have talked about invoking the notwithstanding clause, but none of them during an election campaign. And for what it's worth, while the clause has been used at the provincial level, including by Saskatchewan, Quebec, and Ontario, no federal government has ever used Section 33 to pass a law. What do you think? Will it resonate with Canadians?
I think the message that, it sounds like of the 4 pillars, being tough on crime is one of the Conservative Party messages. And I think they're wondering and emphasizing it this week ahead of the debate to see how it resonates, to see if it shifts some of those polling numbers where we're seeing the Conservatives trail somewhat, if not quite substantially. And it's resonant in ridings in British Columbia and some in Quebec, where crime or the perception of it is a real issue. Now, the legal side of it, about the notwithstanding clause, harder for me to kind of connect with about whether or not the public understands it, because them, like me, went to the Law and Order School of Law, and so we only understand that it's a significant use of the law, but not necessarily its ramifications. And I think its ramifications are quite substantial anytime you have a federal government reaching for a major piece of power and executing it, especially when it may or may not be at odds with the values of the Supreme Court. But we'll leave the law aside and wonder about, is it resonant with the public? And I think in certain cities where crime and drugs are concerns, yes, it is chipping away at the Liberal lead.
Yeah, are you surprised that there hasn't been more time spent on crime this election, with regards to policy? Now, obviously, everybody's talking about this is all about Canada's relationship with the United States. It's all about Donald Trump and tariffs. But, I mean, your show, Party All the Time, has been doing a great job. Your most recent episode about climate change as an example, in making sure that some of the issues are seeing some conversation around them, making sure that Canadians are talking about them. But on the crime front, it's always been more of a conservative talking point, for whatever that's worth. But are you surprised that there hasn't been more buzz around it, considering what Canadians indicate they perceive as the biggest issues, in particular in the big cities right now?
Yeah, I do wonder about it. I understand it is a very salient and popular conservative talking point, but about its sort of publicity as one of the issues of the day, it's really only the Conservatives that are kind of hitting and underlining this message. There's been some talk among Liberals about, talking about drug policy, but that sort of thing makes people uncomfortable, and it's not really a bread and butter issue for most Canadians when they go to the polls. Not to say it's not an everyday issue for a lot of Canadians. Obviously, we know people are affected by many of these issues around public safety, but is it a voting issue is the question. And for a lot of Canadians, it's not, unless you're looking at more conservative voters. And so I think this is very much a message for Conservatives, and one that puts a lot of chill in NDP or leftist thinking around safety and social justice. It's a huge deviation, though, from what we're seeing in Canada around public safety thinking, which is that you see not police associations, but police bodies themselves saying that there needs to be a more kind of compassionate approach to crime, which is kind of at odds, or it has some tension with what the Conservatives are pitching.
Yeah, this interesting comment here from Super Chat Ken, who says, again, Pierre Poilievre can't seem to understand how undermining our legal system looks Trumpish. Says, can't pivot, won't pivot. Interesting timing for Super Chat Ken's question. Everybody's talking about this Trump hot mic moment, obviously, with El Salvador's president. The plan to basically deport homegrowns, which is pretty wild, obviously. I know that's what everybody's talking about stateside today. Do you think there is a risk by talking about invoking the notwithstanding clause that it comes across? I mean, or are we searching for parallels here? Are we looking too hard to find similarities here, more than the average voter is going to be doing?
Ooh, that's a good question, because I think for people on the left of the spectrum, the parallel is there to be made. That these are, one is the tip of the spear, and what you see with Trump and the El Salvadorian president is the spear itself. So things exist on a spectrum. But I think in this present moment, it feels a bit too far apart for folks.
Yeah.
I think the closer you get to the center, they're not necessarily seeing the parallel. They're seeing two political leaders vying for election who have political differences, but not necessarily seeing the full comparison of a Poilievre to a Trump. But that's not to say that the rhetoric isn't similar or isn't present. It just isn't necessarily the connection that I feel that I see people making.
Huh. Sean's in our live chat right now, powered by Park Power. Sean, is this true? He says, today is the 3-month anniversary of Jespo saying he would bet his house on a Poilievre win. Sean says it's crazy how things change. I don't know if that's actually true. If we wind back, what is it? What is it? April 15th? Is that right? So on January 15th, that would have been. I said I would bet my house on a Poilievre win. Maybe I did. We should look back.
Who did you bet? Who's getting your house?
Tail of the tape. Well, I sure hope. I don't know. We didn't do any casino action or head online. I don't think, did we, Johnny? I don't think so. I think I'm okay. I think my house is okay for now. Although, to be quite honest, if you get my house now, I just get to sign over the mortgage. That might actually be nice. The rental market's looking more appealing right now. We'll see. We're hanging out with Vicky Mochama.
That's where we are when it comes to housing affordability. Sometimes you gotta put your money on the line.
Yeah, I guess so. But shout out to Sean. If that actually is true, if it is the 3-month anniversary and he's just like had it circled on his calendar, number one, that's hilarious. But it does go to prove a point. Like for like a year, we've laughed about this. I've talked about this. I'm more guilty than absolutely anybody of talking about like prime minister in waiting, the eventual Canada's next prime minister, 100%. I know that's not even saying anything profound. That's just where most people or where a lot of people were at anyway. And it's wild to look at the turnaround.
You've hit my very most annoying bugbear of a point when it comes to Canadian politics. Those polls are reflective. They are a snapshot. They're not the whole story. That we don't even have like riding level data or exit polling data like you get in the United States. Bless his heart, 338 Canada gets a lot of good data. It's a snapshot. It doesn't tell you everything. The only poll that counts is on election day. That's it. That's the whole game.
100%. You're not wrong at all. Taking a look at Philippe at 338canada.com at his federal projections. Again, like Vicky said, this is a polling aggregator, so it's a snapshot. But Vicky, we were kind of marveling at this yesterday as they're predicting up to 7 liberal seats in the province of Alberta. I'm honestly going to say right now, I would have to see that to believe it. Not that it's impossible. It is definitely possible, but 7's a lot in Alberta. We're talking to Vicky Mochama in just a bit. I want to jump into her most recent episode, taking on, like we said, covering all the important stuff, including some of the stuff that's not like leading the headlines across the country. You can subscribe to Party All the Time wherever you get your podcasts. You can find them on Apple Podcasts as well. More from Vicky in just a quick second. First, I want to let you know it is now Tuesday, the 15th of April, and it is opening day at the Ranch Golf and Country Club. I don't know if you're going to be able to get a tee time. Like if you're listening to watching this live, you can check out theranchgolf.com right now to get in touch with them to book a tee time. Why not? We've been waiting all winter. You've been hitting against the screens. You watched the Masters over the weekend and you can't wait to swing those clubs, right? The Ranch Golf and Country Club is Alberta's best public golf course. We're proud to partner with them and, of course, to host our Real Talk Golf Classic there coming up on the Thursday, the 19th of June. You can check out their tailor-made performance center. Make sure you leave some time for a beverage or two on the patio. Their 19th hole. You can tour the golf course virtually and otherwise, again, by visiting their website. That's theranchgolf.com. Deadline day is fast approaching for the Full House Lottery. If you're listening to this on the 15th, it's tomorrow. You can check out fullhouse.ca to get your tickets and learn more about these big, huge grand prizes. All of this in support of cardiac care at the University of Alberta and the Royal Alexandra Hospitals. Both of the hospitals joining forces on this one to offer up prizes you won't find anywhere else, including a $2.25 million legacy signature dream home. You can tour it online. Also see the Alfa Romeo that it comes with. Oh, and they also throw in $20,000 cash. 2 other grand prizes, including dream vacations for life and a dream tiny home. Again, this is Alberta's largest hospital, 50/50, all on offer at fullhouse.ca. Check this out. The Nisku Energy Show coming up on the 14th and 15th of May in beautiful Nisku, Alberta, just south of Edmonton. I'm really proud to be hosting it. You can check out yourchamber.ca for details. This is put on by the Leduc, Nisku, and Wetaskiwin Regional Chamber of Commerce, a groundbreaking 2-day event bringing together leaders from across Alberta's energy sector, showcasing local innovation and expertise shaping Alberta's energy future. It all starts with the Premier's Breakfast, 7 a.m. on the 14th of May at beautiful Silent Ice Sports and Entertainment Center. If you haven't seen this place yet, wow. Absolutely beautiful. They're going to be connecting job seekers with employers, This is a premium networking opportunity with industry leaders and government officials. Again, that's the Nisku Energy Show, May 14th and 15th. I'll see you there. Get your tickets today at yourchamber.ca. Hanging out with Vicky Mochama. You can find her podcast wherever you get your podcasts. That's Party All the Time, including iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and you can check out her episodes visually on the Real Talk YouTube channel. Vicky, you guys take on affordability. You're talking climate change in your most recent episode. Why don't we take a quick look from the show, and then we'll get up to speed with the audience. Here it is from Party All the Time.
The roads across the Northwest Territories and Yukon and Nunavut are, not a lot of roads in Nunavut anyway, but across Northwest Territories and Yukon are thawing because the permafrost that underpins them is just everywhere. It's thawing and freezing and thawing and freezing. So these roads are like way more expensive to maintain and build now. And this is all adding up to literally tens of billions to maybe hundreds of billions of damage to our economy every year by the 2050s. Like huge amounts of money being taken out of our economy. This is like pocketbook stuff. But when you're saying like, I can't afford an apartment, why do I give a shit about something that's going to happen in 2050? I hear you, I guess, but it's also like, it doesn't need to be a negative impact on your day-to-day life today to do better.
Although there is one, right? Like there's an easy sell, which is you could talk about insurance policy alone, right? Like if we're going to talk about affordability.
Okay, I've never heard anyone like chuckle after somebody says insurance policy, so you're going to have to expand. This is clearly climate nerd chit chat, and I'm here for it. What about insurance policy?
We talk about affordability when it comes to like the gas pump, but let's talk about affordability when it comes to flooded basements and how extreme heat withers away at like buildings and such, right? Like climate change is going to lead to extreme temperatures, both warm and cold, that will require you to retrofit your house or your apartment. That might flood your basement more. That's going to increase your insurance prices.
So that's Vicky Mochama in conversation with Jimmy Thompson from Canada's National Observer and Fatima Syed from the Narwhal. Jimmy kind of sounding the alarm. Nobody seems to care about climate change this election, but they should.
Well, that's the reason I wanted to talk about, in previous elections, it was one of the kind of calling card. Everybody had to have a response or an answer. And for some reason in this election, we've gone quiet on climate change. She has disappeared like a third-tier celebrity. But it's still happening, and we're going to see the consequences of it. And I just still wanted to have the conversation, and I'm so glad Jimmy and Fatima were there to have it with me and connected to something we've been talking about on the show, which is what does it mean when we're having conversations about affordability and how does climate change tie in? So like in that last clip, Fatima ties into whether or not you can afford to, deal with flooding in your basement, whether you can retrofit your house for hotter and colder temperatures, whether you can afford the kinds of doors that keep out weather. Politicians aren't at Home Depot standing outside saying, you now have to buy a multi-$1,000 door in order to stay in the house that you already live in because the climate has changed. But it's something that's very real for Canadians who are spending that money anyways. We are making green investments in our homes day to day, and whether or not the politicians or the parties are talking about it is significant. And at the top of that clip, Jimmy was talking about, a pillar for both politicians, which is how do we frame our economy in a way that is sustainable and strong? But at the same time, you have climate really chipping away at our infrastructure and our ability to connect communities, to ensure that those communities have wealth and prosperity in their communities. And all of that is due to climate change. It is one of the largest impacts on everyone's day to day. And yet it's not really present in this election. So I just wanted to have that chat.
I guess like there will be conversation about climate change in a sense, in the bigger context of whatever the governing party starting in May really decides to do to replace a consumer carbon tax, right? Like there will be expectations globally that if Canada's getting rid of this in meaningful fashion, not pressing pause, not suspending it, but it's gone. It's but a memory. It's in the history books that there will have to be some sort of initiative to replace it. And then I suspect that'll get Canadians talking about this issue again. Do you think?
Hope so. I mean, I'm interested in, and there's ways that this conversation comes up, which is like when we talk about a national energy corridor. Once upon a time, that was a climate priority, and that was talking about different, not necessarily getting pipelines from coast to coast, but about making sure that we had an energy grid that was consistent and green and went across the country. Now we're talking about it in the context of an economy. I just still think we're still talking about climate change, no matter what the conversation is in the moment. The big existential crisis the world faces in Canada is a major recipient of its concerns is in our communities and in our conversation anyways. We might as well just talk about what that means for real. And that's what we did.
Yeah. And you do a great job doing it. For folks that don't know, Party All the Time episodes, fresh episodes every Friday. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and rate and review the podcast. That really helps it as well with the algorithm. The trio also touches on critical minerals, which I think is interesting. Not a lot of Canadians talk about this, but this is guaranteed from an industry standpoint, an economic standpoint, an environmental standpoint. People are going to be talking about critical minerals, and you guys tee it up well.
The critical minerals thing is bullshit. I mean, specifically because American companies, mining companies, already have access to Canadian minerals. The American Defense Department has invested in the Ring of Fire. Like there is as much access to critical minerals for the U.S. now as there would be if they outright annexed Canada, because we have free trade, and also because the big barrier is not permitting or getting, foreign permission to mine here. We're very open to foreign mining companies. We have a Brazilian mining giant that owns an entire town in Manitoba. Like we're very into it. It's really just that we are. It takes a long time to do these things, so that's the big hiccup here. So it's not really correct to say that he wants our critical minerals and that's why he would annex us. Maybe that's what is going on in his head.
So there's a lot of reasons why Donald Trump might want Canada. Jimmy's not necessarily convinced that's one of them.
Yeah, I mean, the question I had put to him was, one of the kind of striking things of the last couple of months was, the seriousness and gravity with which both Justin Trudeau and Quebec's François Legault came out to say, the reason he's making this comment about this 51st state and is pursuing a certain kind of aggressive style with Canada is that Donald Trump wants Canada's critical minerals. Now, you have to kind of cycle a bit backwards to connect critical minerals to climate change, which is to say many of these minerals like copper, nickel, gold, etc., are the backbone of a lot of renewable energies like EV batteries and wind turbines. So we need them in order to make this kind of green transition. But mining itself is not inherently green or climate friendly, but getting those sources is at the center of a green transition that we're trying to make and support. And so when we're looking at critical minerals or the expansion of electric vehicles as a major method of transportation, there is this question: what is Trump asking, or what is he saying? And these politicians were so serious about it. And Jimmy, who is editor-in-chief of Canada's National Observer and gets to see the climate politics day in, day out, says, no, it's a little bit bullshit coming from the United States and from these politicians. There's a kind of greater political and economic understanding at play.
What are you taking on next episode?
Next episode, we're talking about one of my favorite things. We're going to talk to Inori Roy from The Local about a piece she's working on about the idea of immigrant communities and how they vote. So there's a lot of talk. I don't know about you guys in Alberta, but in Ontario especially, that in order to win Ontario, you have to win this belt around Toronto called the 905. And it's a lot of immigrant communities, newcomer communities. Some are more longstanding than others. And there's a lot of growth and shifting in these places. And you see some of this echoed a little bit in Alberta around Calgary, a little bit in Vancouver and Montreal as well. And so in order to win these kind of ridings that are urban, politicians have to have kind of like an ethnic or minority community strategy. And so she's going to look into that and tell us what she finds out. And that I'm having a good friend of mine and writer for Slate.com, Sachi Cole, is going to join us. And Tula Dramonis out of Montreal's Cult MTL is also going to be on the show. So we're going to talk about, what it means when ethnic and minority communities are part of any party's political strategy.
I just yesterday learned something that, I don't know, maybe I should have known this forever. I had no idea. But there was a really interesting development all real talkers are going to have to take a drink right now. Every time that I mention my home riding of Edmonton Center, everybody's got to take a drink. But it's just a really interesting riding. What do you have on the go? Oh, you have tea on the go. Nice job. So there's a number of storylines at play for those listening outside Alberta. So Randy Boissonnault is the incumbent, former Trudeau cabinet minister, sort of like resigned 11th hour when Mark Carney was like, yeah, you're not running. So then Eleanor Olszewski, this longtime, Liberal volunteer and donor is there. I'm sure she's a very capable lawyer. Everybody says she's a wonderful lady. Kind of nobody outside politics knows who she is. I say that respectfully. Respectfully, I will say that nobody outside of politics knows who the Conservative nominee is either. Saeed Ahmed, who worked his ass off to beat former MP James Cumming in the nomination race, kind of swooped in and surprised Cumming, who has served in that capacity before, wanted to go back. And then you've got the NDP candidate, Tricia Estabrooks, who's the only name that I think people would recognize because she's been the chair of the Edmonton Public School Board. She was a CBC journalist, probably the best name recognition in the party that traditionally finishes third place, but not like a distant third in the riding. So everybody's kind of watching this going like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen in this riding? I realized yesterday, people said that Saeed Ahmed out-organized James Cumming. James Cumming himself said it on this show. He's like, he just out-organized us. We didn't see it coming. Saeed Ahmed mobilized his community and like sold a whole bunch of memberships and was victorious in the nomination race. I did not know that one of the big challenges facing his campaign, and this is a comment from adjacent to his campaign, permanent residents in Canada can vote in party process like a nomination, but cannot vote in the federal election, which I was not aware of. Kind of interesting. I'm not surprised that permanent residents cannot vote in a federal election, but I did not know that you can vote in Canada in a party nomination. So isn't that kind of an interesting one as well? That's kind of an interesting dynamic to watch in Edmonton Center because the Ahmed campaign obviously busted their butts and got the nomination. But now it's like when you've built this base of support and then you almost kind of can't go to that base of support. I mean, aside from door knocking, volunteering and the like, but for actual votes, isn't that an interesting story? I was unaware of it till yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of one of those things that has been talked about, but we haven't really addressed it.
Yeah.
Which is to say, when there was this concern about nomination level foreign interference, this is what they were talking about, that countries like China and India are leveraging misinformation or other types of power to not just sway people to vote at a nomination level event or a riding level event when it doesn't necessarily translate into the full race itself or the electoral version of the race. Some would say allowing permanent residents to vote in a nomination level is one of those gateways to democracy thing, like being able to volunteer at a polling station. It allows people to access the mechanics of democracy without necessarily giving them all the tools that a citizen is entitled to. That's one argument. There are those who say it presents a major security issue, as we've seen when it comes to these foreign interference stories. So really, Ryan, you've been talking about it. You just didn't know you were talking about it. It's kind of wild.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Gizmo's in our live chat right now says, also of note, permanent residents can join a political party but can't donate money to a political party, which is kind of interesting too. Hey, I endeavor to learn something every single day. And the forced humility reminds everybody that it's not too hard for me to learn something every single day. There's a lot I don't know. I do know that people should subscribe to Party All the Time right freaking now on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, don't forget, you can watch Vicky on the Real Talk YouTube channel as well. Always so good to see you, my friend. Can't wait for your episode on Friday. Thanks for making time for us today.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Yeah, you got it. Welcome back as well. That's Vicky Mochama, just back from Milan, Italy. We're proud to be working with her through this election campaign. We're going to get to more of your comments on this. I want to jump into the Real Talk live chat, powered by Park Power Plus. We've got some emails. Lisa talking about Buttongate. She doesn't call it that. She calls it the liberal prank. We've got some comments following our conversation with Dr. Andy Knight yesterday. Pretty interesting stuff. Specialist in international relations, political scientist from the University of Alberta. We talked about a lot. We brought him in to talk about Donald Trump and the future of America. He says the U.S. should be declared a pariah state. He said that Donald Trump, yes, is a fascist. I said, come on, people are throwing that word around, right, doctor? People are just calling everybody fascist these days. He says, no, here's the argument. He lays it out. He says he fits the bill. If the shoe fits, wear it kind of idea. But it was his comments about the Canadian military that got some of you going. So I want to get to Don's email on that. If you're Jonathan, who has served our country in the military, thank you for your service, Jonathan. You're going, well, where the hell is my email? This was written with such heat, Jonathan, that we're saving it for the flamethrower. That's going to be an early edition coming up on Thursday of this week, powered by and presented by the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. Before we get into what Real Talkers have to say about the top stories this week, I want to let you know our friends at Friesen Brothers are ready to take all the work off your plate this Easter break, this Easter weekend. How's that sound? Spend more time with your family, less time in the kitchen. Their team of Red Seal chefs is ready to go with their Easter dinner box. Plus, they've got premium meat specials. You can learn more about all of it either in-store or by visiting their website, friesen.com. And if you want to go straight to the Easter dinner box, you can also just check out cateringbyfriesen.com, but you can order it online. $79.99 per 4 people, which is wonderfully affordable for the quality that you're going to get with this. A personalized Easter dinner with catering by Friesen Brothers, including turkey, both dark and white meat, roasted baby potatoes, creamy dill carrots. They'll blow your mind, I guarantee it. Tray buns, cranberry sauce, turkey gravy, sour cream, and real bacon bits. Everybody will have something special with an Easter dinner box by catering by Friesen Brothers. Our friends at California Closets ready for that free design consultation with you today, tomorrow, or whenever it fits your schedule. This team of proud Canadians, that's right, this business, Canadian owned and operated, is designing and installing the premier custom closets and storage solutions for the entire home, including for a lot of you this time of year, if you're like me, you're going to want to find a way to create more space, a little more breathing room, whether that's a beautiful Murphy bed in your spare bedroom doubling as a home office. Maybe you're finally going to get that laundry room under control. Or maybe it's the family entertainment center. This is where you gather every single day together. Why not make it your favorite spot in the house? Everything guaranteed for life. California Closets of Canada can work with any budget. You can get that conversation started with them today by requesting that free consultation at californiaclosets.ca. Our friends at Solar by Kuby are hiring right now. This is the time of year. They've been chomping at the bit. Their team is ready to go with installations on homes, businesses. They'll be on office towers. They'll be on barns. They'll be on cabins and cottages, you name it, with solar energy solutions to power your life. If you're going to go green and start saving money this summer, the first step is to get a free quote at kuby.ca. That's Kuby.ca. But if you check out their Solar by Kuby link, you'll also find the career opportunities available right now. They've got a whole bunch of them for installers, salespeople, engineers, sales experts, you name it. If you're looking to live and work in Kamloops, Lethbridge, Calgary, or Edmonton, explore a fit with Solar by Kuby today at Kuby.ca. And our friends at North Road Investment Council have been doing just an unbelievable job helping us understand market movement right now and what's happening in the financial markets. Did you know that they offer hourly fee advisory services? This is kind of a low-risk way to introduce yourself to North Road Investment Council and see if there's a nice long-term fit. This team, led by Marshall and Carey, based out of Alberta's capital city, is locally owned, independently owned, and they do work in a different, more flexible way. They understand that life's financial journey doesn't always follow a straight path. They offer strategic approaches to wealth management that align with your vision. Learn more today by visiting North Road Investment Council online at northroadic.com. Appreciate the comments coming in on the Real Talk live chat powered by Park Power. We got an email from Lisa here to talk at RyanJespersen.com. Says, although I don't agree with Liberal staffers planting buttons at the Manning Center event, says I suggest much of the conservative outrage is centered on, oh, we wish we'd thought of that. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I see outrage either. I see it's kind of more like when your parents, they're not mad at you, Johnny. They just say, I'm not mad at you. I'm disappointed in you. What do you make of that? What do you make of the prank? Obviously, now that they got busted dropping off the buttons, probably not worth it. But do you see a little humor in it? Where do you land on it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like it. I think it's pretty childish. Like if you're especially if these are like do we know the staffers? Are they just low level? Are they mid level?
They're not identifying them.
If these were high level, I'd be like, because I believe that Carney had no idea about it, but if they're low level, which it seems like, immature, maybe first campaign they're working on, yeah, maybe they go and do something like this. But would they do it without, checking with someone else a little higher up? That's what kind of bothers me in the back of my mind is, did someone a little higher up who should have known better about this know about it? And if they did, then that's really bad.
This is always one of the things in politics, though, when something like this happens. This isn't like, it's not the most serious thing, but it's also not nothing. Like, the party has to respond to it or else it can become something, right? So they got to respond to it. But in politics, they always, it's like the same with when you write newspaper columns. Anytime a newspaper column has to be short, or a good editor will tell you, this is a good writing tip for anybody, you always need to be able to chop from the bottom. So write every paragraph in your piece or in your story so that it would make sense if the story ended there, because sometimes editors have to cut from the bottom, and that's what they do in political campaigns as well when they can, is cut from the bottom. So sometimes it's like the volunteers, the junior level staffers, I'm sorry, you're going to have to fall on this one. You're going to have to jump on the grenade this time, because this isn't going to turn into a bigger thing where the key players in the campaign are going to start resigning.
And I thought about that too. Like, maybe this was someone higher up who thought this would be funny, or like, in the age of social media and owning people and dropping bombs, this would be great. And then when Carney or someone else saw it, or when the media got a hold of it, they were like, oh, okay, I fucked up here.
Yeah.
And then you just push it down the ladder, right?
Yeah, no kidding. This Trump story is pretty wild as well, and I know that Rachel Maddow spent a lot of time, well, everybody's talking about it in the United States. The president basically caught on a hot mic with the president of El Salvador. So the story here basically, like in like one or two sentences, basically one of Donald Trump's solutions for, and can we also acknowledge, before we even get into this, that same deal with Pierre Poilievre, when you're starting to talk about like the most violent criminals, like gang members with like, repeatedly engaging violently with police, or targeting innocent citizens, or mass murderers, or these types of things, like the big drug runners, the people that are bringing in pounds and pounds of fentanyl, or pallets of cocaine, or like whatever the deal is, running guns, caught with machetes, like these types of things. I think you can talk a little bit differently. You can appeal a little bit differently to a population, because most people want to feel safe in their communities. Most people want to feel safe in their neighborhoods. They want to believe that their kids are safe at school, right? They want to believe that they're not going to be like out at a shopping mall or a football game and then run into somebody who's like out on bail, for some violent crime, the 15th time they've been in front of the judge, and one of these types of scenarios, right? So Trump has basically said that, especially, as part of the ICE missions and rounding up illegals and all the stuff that Trump promised to do, that they were going to take, the bottom of the barrel, basically. They were going to take the most violent criminals. They were going to be deported immediately. They were going to be sent to El Salvador. And the promise to the American people was that El Salvador is going to deal with them. They're out of our hair. It's not our problem anymore.
And El Salvador's like, what?
Well, and El Salvador, I think, sees a huge commercial opportunity here, sees a huge revenue opportunity, so they're loving it. And so or at least political leadership is there. And so the president of El Salvador is speaking with Donald Trump at the White House, basically came after the U.S. Supreme Court, for a bit of background, ordered the Trump administration to return to facilitate the return of a guy by the name of Abrego Garcia. He's 29. He's a dad out of Maryland. He was sent to El Salvador on the 15th of March. So, call it 3 weeks, now about a month ago, despite a court order from about 5 years ago prohibiting his return to his home country for fear of persecution by a gang there. Now, officials in the United States say this guy's a member of MS-13. The Trump administration wants to double down on this. But here's where the rubber hits the road on this really exploding into a big news story in the United States, and that's the hot mic catching the president saying that, quote, homegrowns should be next. So not people that came to the United States illegally, not people that are in the United States illegally.
No, the children of those people.
But even American citizens, violent criminals, career criminals. Trump telling El Salvador's leadership, you guys got to build like 5 more prisons here. He says it's not big enough right now. Build more of them, please, as many as we can get out of our country. And he's pressed by reporters on whether he meant deporting American citizens to El Salvador. He says, I'm all for it.
But I don't understand. This obviously costs El Salvador money, or is the American government paying? They're fitting the whole bill. Well, now I see what's happening here. This is Australia all over again. Yeah. We're going to send all our criminals to a quote-unquote island somewhere else, which in this case is El Salvador, which isn't an island. But Yeah, I don't like it. I don't like it.
This is
keep your own criminals where they were born or where they live, and rehabilitate them there, or keep them in prison if they're super violent criminals. If they're violent criminals, keep them in there. And I don't agree with this at all. But I can see how. What say do we have when two countries agree on something and make a handshake, and one's making money?
This is it's pretty wild. They call it like the CCOT, I think they call it. It's like a mega prison. When Trump planned initially, like the introduction of the American people to deport these Venezuelan gang members, was like this mega prison was a thing well before that. They call it the Center for Terrorism Confinement. I always think of like wild. Like, can you imagine working here? Or can you imagine if like your dad or your mom worked there? It's considered the largest prison in the Americas, a capacity of 40,000 inmates.
Jesus.
And like they're not in there for like stealing a loaf of bread, right? It's been probably, they describe it as symbolic of El Salvador's controversial crackdown on domestic crime. Now home to El Salvador's most hardened criminals, including what they bill as the worst of the worst. CNN sent David Culver there to check it out, and his team described it as cells where they would say are holding about 80 inmates at a time for 23 and a half hours a day.
Jeez.
Can you imagine? And says the only furniture is tiered metal bunks, no sheets, pillows, or mattresses, an open toilet, a cement basin, and a plastic bucket for washing, a large jug for drinking water. Pretty wild.
Well, when I heard this, I immediately thought, I bet the human rights inside a prison in El Salvador is way lower than the bar that it is in the States. Plus, if El Salvador wants to make the most bang for their buck, of course they're going to give them, the cheapest housing, the cheapest food, the cheapest treatment, right?
$200 million a year to run this place, and the United States is providing $6 million of that as part of this deal.
That's it?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like that's like a
so that's what I mean. How are they
to be able to solve your problem?
How is El Salvador making money then?
Well, $6 million probably goes a long way. I don't know.
But it costs $200 million to
run the whole thing, including El Salvador's prisoners, right?
Yeah.
This is just the United States absolving itself of these violent gang members that Donald Trump promised to deport. Yeah. But the idea of sending homegrowns, the idea of sending American, like I don't think Canadians need a comparison. It's pretty simple. But like, imagine how you would feel if the Prime Minister of Canada or political leadership promised to start deporting Canadians to another country.
Yeah.
Now, like I said earlier, there's no sympathy.
No, I'm not advocating for criminals either. But what I think, and somebody just said it in the chat as I literally was thinking about it. But like, let's say like you're charged with murder, whatever, and you get sent down to El Salvador. I would guess your due process is a lot harder. It's a lot harder to appeal. It's a lot harder to get a new trial. It's a lot harder to talk to your lawyer. Like, you're pretty much exiled, right? With that in my mind, and I'm not advocating for violent criminals, but some people, I mean, we know that a large portion of people in jail are there, are innocent or, have committed crimes that maybe they weren't guilty of, or they were involved in a violent crime. So they were kind of lumped in the pile or whatever. And again, it sounds like I'm making excuses for criminals. I'm not, but to put them in another country, in El Salvador, in a prison cell with 100 other people or 80 other people, it seems like you're cut off from the world. It seems like your due process has ended, right?
Yeah. Sylvia is saying these people were sent to El Salvador with no due process. She says, Ryan, this is not funny. I don't know who thinks it's funny. I'm not saying it's funny. It's just wild. It's a wild story. Idris says, we can't fall for talking points and lies here. Aaron says, if you're poor, you're screwed if you ever end up at the remand. Matthew says it's pretty easy for something like this to be profitable if you're not spending any money on the welfare of the prisoners, which is basically what you said as well.
Miss KD saying due process is supposed to happen before deportation. It does, but then you have hearings on parole. You have, appeal hearings. You have all these things. And I just feel like if you're exiled to El Salvador, a lot of that stuff isn't happening, or it's slowed to a snail's pace, right?
Yeah. So the Supreme Court, you saw this maybe, and what was wild is Donald Trump yesterday was talking about the Supreme Court. He goes, the Supreme Court, ruled 9-0, like 9-0, kind of making it sound like the Supreme Court was ruling in his favor, but no. He was like mocking it. The Supreme Court ruled unanimously that Trump's administration must facilitate the release of the man deported to El Salvador, this father, this Maryland man that we're talking about, this 29-year-old. So, yeah, pretty wild story, and obviously one that we'll keep an eye on. But, this is Michael makes a fair point in here. He says this is a really slippery slope. Like, everybody, regardless of how you feel about an individual, has a right to due process and a trial. And that's 100% true.
Not just that. I mean, and again, this is not sympathy or whatever, but, like, if you're an inmate in America or Canada, like, you can go outside, you can walk around, you can get your exercise, your family members can visit, every month or whatever. Like, and I get that, like, should they have access to that? Should you have a right when you commit a violent crime or when you rape or when you murder? No, probably not. But these are all things that we agreed on a long time ago that were part of human rights and part of being incarcerated, right? And I just feel like, and it's hard to argue these things because immediately people think you have sympathy for violent offenders, which I don't. I have respect and I agree with the laws we have in place and the way we incarcerate people. The only thing I don't agree with is that, people who hurt women, children, and do these violent crimes who are definitely guilty are let out earlier than they should.
Matt says our due process didn't happen in this case. None of these deportees got a trial. Tracy says it's shocking how many people aren't seeing. Can you give me that Gavin Newsom clip? She says it's shocking how many people aren't seeing or hearing about the insane level of constitutional crisis in the U.S. Tracy says the United States is pretty much over. If you missed our interview with Dr. Andy Knight in our most recent episode, so that would have been yesterday, the 14th of April, make sure you check it out. Fascinating stuff on him talking about kind of the future of the United States, but not just that. He talks about the New World Disorder. He talks about empires that have risen and fallen, and this may sound ridiculous and dramatic to you, but the way that he describes it and what we're seeing in front of us, I feel like it's like kind of canary in the coal mine time. And Dr. Knight's interview with us was really, really excellent. Make sure you check it out. But United States, states within the Union that typically welcome hundreds of thousands or millions of Canadians every year, as you're about to hear from California's governor, are really feeling the pinch as fewer and fewer Canadians are willing to travel down there, even to the happiest place on earth, to Disneyland. They're feeling the pinch, not just, I think, because Canadians don't love the way that their country's being talked about by the president, not just because the Canadian dollar's not doing so hot, but also I think because people are afraid of being arrested and detained when they're traveling with a Canadian passport in the United States, because it has happened. It is happening. And now California, by way of its governor, on an all-out publicity blitz, like a tourism blitz, trying to convince Canadians to kind of forget all about that and come on down.
and Canada have always shared so much in common. Sure, you know who's trying to stir things up back in D.C., but don't let that ruin your beach plans. California, it's the ultimate playground. 2,000 miles from Washington and a world away in mindset. From our iconic beaches and national parks to world-class wine, food, and outdoor adventure, there's something here for everyone. Last year, nearly 2 million Canadians visited California, because here in California, we've got plenty of sunshine and a whole lot of love for our neighbors up north.
So a friend of mine posted this on social media and just said, that's a no from me, dog. I don't know if he, although I just had a friend literally just back from Disneyland. She took her family down there. They had a wonderful time. I don't know.
I would say if you're going to the States, you're probably going to California, LA, New York. These are the places you're going. Las Vegas. So like
they're feeling
but that's
the
a pretty
pinch, though,
snappy promo there, eh?
I think they're feeling the
pinch.
pinch.
Everyone's feeling the pinch. But like it's funny because we had that first 30 days where everyone was like, I'm never going to this. And now I see people like slowly leaking on their social media, that they're crossing the border and going to certain places. And I'm like, oh, are we just done with this now? Like,
yeah.
we're okay to travel and do what we want. Well, I had it booked months ago and, the fires are kind of cooling.
Yeah. Tracy says, no thanks, California. And you guys know we have family in California. Michael says California is wonderful, but I won't be risking a visit anytime soon.
Amazing.
There were many years, if you would have asked me, I would have loved to live in California. But right now, I don't know. We're just not going to travel to the United States for the next little bit, at least.
Yeah.
Aaron says, my daughter's boyfriend recently canceled his trip to the U.S. because of the state of things. I bet a lot of people are doing that. Chief Sharon says, I'm going to New York on Sunday for work. She says, I'm only going to buy food. That's the only way she's going to spend her money down there. Says, I usually won't have time to shop anyway. So there you go. JJ says it's a reasonable message from Governor Newsom, but he doesn't have to go through customs or border crossings where he's got no jurisdiction and not so great things can happen. And I think JJ is bang on right there.
We should get some people on to talk about, because maybe the next person I see sneaking across the border on my social media, I'll be like, just come on the show or send us an email. Let us know how your crossing was. Because for me, when I cross, I'm an American citizen. So like I've never been hassled, going through immigration or anything, because I am an American citizen. So but I hear these stories, and I have lately. I don't know if they're true or not. I mean, it could be, it could be just people making things up a little, but people have said they've had trouble. So
no, it is a thing.
They've been given attitude.
It's definitely a thing. Well, some people have been detained. Like Giants for Life says I just canceled my trip. I was going to Vegas to see Dead and Company at the Sphere. I mean, that's a big cancellation to make. And I don't know if you're like me.
What are you gonna do with all those mushrooms?
Are you? Well, the good news is you can eat them here.
You can also email us at.
You can also drop them off at any. Well, because what we do is we offer safe disposal.
Yeah, we do.
Of organics. We will
find a place for it.
If you're a parent that has found weed, hash, or mushrooms in your children's bedroom, and you want to make sure it's disposed of safely, contact Johnny Infamous.
Bring it on the show. We'll talk about it, and then just let us dispose of it after.
Yeah, that's right. And then we'll put together an event for our Real Talk YouTube channel members. East Coast Stoner here says, no rights for inmates. Put them to work. I think that, it just depends on what inmates means to you. Like, are inmates people that have been arrested, or inmates people that have been convicted?
Yeah, a lot of these people, it looks like, are not they haven't been fully convicted. They've just been charged with a crime.
You're gone.
Yeah.
You're gone, or not even charged.
That's what bothers me.
You're a troublemaker. You're here, but here's the thing: if you're here, if you're in the United States illegally, that's their crime.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what the Trump administration is saying here. That's the justification you're making. You don't typically need to work too hard to justify cracking down on the most violent criminals, which I think is why Pierre Poilievre. I know that there's people are saying there's some concern here of he's going to invoke the notwithstanding clause. Number one, you're talking about multiple, or let's call them mass murderers. Like, I saw some Carla Homolka comments in the live chat, and I agree with you. I mean, if you follow me on X, or if you've listened to me host talk shows over the years, like, people will say, where do you lean left? Where do you lean right? Like, I lean pretty far right on violent crimes, like you said, against children, sexual violence,
the ones
homicide.
I think that,
like, and I have seen enough. I tweeted about this like a week ago, Johnny. Individuals responsible for, and one in particular, violent abuse of a child in their care, of their children, violent abuse over a period of years. Considering time served, considering everything else, maybe they didn't get enough hugs as a kid themselves. I'm not trying to be glib, but 6 months for violently abusing a child physically for years, right? And so I understand why some people want to see, the idea of, like, lock him up and throw away the key, right? I understand, and we'll get advocates in good faith and driven by empathy and evidence writing into the show. As soon as you start talking about the death penalty or capital punishment, they'll say, listen, a civilized society doesn't do that, right? An educated society doesn't do that. We recognize there are flaws in the judicial system. People have been wrongfully committed, this, that, and the other. There's evidence that, recidivism, the reoffending nature of someone can be addressed meaningfully with proper supports in prison. And you want to believe all that.
Of course.
But at the same time, when somebody hears of, for example, a child that has been violently abused for years by somebody they're supposed to be able to trust.
Of course.
And there's also a very good chance that child, hopefully not, but there's also a very good chance that child, having been subjected to that abuse for many years, will go on to abuse people.
It's just a cycle. And
then I think that Poilievre, I don't know that he needs to make apologies politically here. It's making a calculated move, but he's getting his name out there, and he's getting the policy out there, and he wants people to believe he's going to be way tougher on crime than the Liberals will be.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with you. I'm of the same vein where, like, I believe people can be rehabilitated. I believe therapy, it works. I believe incarceration works. I believe people go to jail and are like, fuck, I don't ever want to be here again, and get out and change their life. And we know a lot of people don't do that as well. The ones I have a problem with, and I'm not saying no one can ever be rehabilitated, but the ones you're talking about, when someone in a position of power or age or a family member and this abuse has gone on for years, and now this person is traumatized, may become an abuser themselves. Like, I don't see how people, after doing something like that for years, for decades, can turn their life around. And I think those people should be sitting in it. You're lucky to be alive. You should be sitting in a little cell. But again, I'm not the one to judge case by case and paint everybody on this side with one brush. But yeah, great comment here. The Tate brothers, we should send them to El Salvador.
And the more that I hear from Andrew Tate, like I know I'm not saying anything profound here, but like I always sort of thought, I didn't know much about the guy. Like you can attest. I'm guilty sometimes of being like, who's Lady Gaga?
Yeah,
like I don't always
you think
know.
they're just
so I was
the
like,
Bitcoin bros or whatever.
Yeah, who's this guy?
He's
got fancy cars. I didn't
dude,
realize he's like a degenerate. Like he's like the worst.
He is. I
These
would
women
call him an
coming
abuser.
forward?
Yeah, I would call him an abuser.
What other word is there?
He uses smaller countries to, gain the trust of women and webcam girls and stuff like that, and then, pays them.
It's wild.
Low amount of money and makes millions of dollars from them. And there's been video and audio and testimony. This is why they were arrested, of him, threatening them,
trafficking women and abusing them and talking
and people
about
just glaze over this, and they're like, oh, they hate him because he's on the right and he's one of these bros who's all about masculine. It's nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
We hear those voices all the time. We're not asking those people to go to jail. This guy, those guys are not those guys are pretty disgusting human beings.
Wild. One of the things I love about this show is that we'll have 3 concurrent conversations at the same time. We can go
chat is
talking like Andrew Tate to Disneyland. But Idris here says on canceling vacations or still traveling to the United States, he says plenty of folks can't handle the cancellation fees. Or Idris, I would add, a lot of people probably didn't even take. You get a little bit of a deal on a lot of your travel. If you book it guaranteed, you can't cancel it. It's for sure set in stone.
Oh yeah, you get
sometimes there's not even the option of,
you
know what I mean? Yeah. And so he's absolutely right. He says he sees that as forgivable. He says no new plans though. A one-way ticket to Guantanamo for a social post. Yeah, we're good, brah. Says Idris. But in all seriousness, I've been hearing from people that have been advised. I'm talking people that are traveling for business. People are being advised to delete apps off their phones, to wipe their phones before they travel. This is wild.
Well, yeah, you can't have an opinion now. If I was just saying, I've never had trouble through immigration because they can see, I was born in the States, but I mean, I very well could because I've been in Canada so long, but I never have. But say they open my phone and saw all the reels we make, trashing Trump or I can just imagine. But I don't. So denial of entry into a country is now your political opinion as well. That's pretty crazy.
I mean,
that's pretty wild.
It sort of feels like Eastern Europe.
They can deny anyone for any
70s.
reason. They don't need to have a reason.
100%.
Really, right?
LT in our live chat powered by Park Power. By the way, get exclusive discounts on internet, electricity, and natural gas by visiting parkpower.ca/realtalk. LT says this could be crime. This could be a winning issue for Poilievre. People are tired of criminals. The worst is when, basically Instagram accounts, they reference Yag Wave. We used Yag Wave yesterday. Warns us that criminals are being re-released and they will likely re-offend. It's kind of funny that you're referencing Yag Wave. I mean, all news outlets do that. We've done it for years. It used to drive me bonkers. I would go on these rants on terrestrial radio because we would get from our newsroom, you get them old school, Johnny. Remember, you'd get the faxes. Otherwise, now they're emails, but they're all from police. And I acknowledge, and I know that we have cops that listen to the show, and you can always send us notes in confidence to talk@ryanjespersen.com. You kind of keep us in the know so we understand how it all works. Police can't spell out that individuals will remain under surveillance, but there are law enforcement members that work very hard in non-glamorous work, surveilling and following, kind of basically the worst of the worst.
I have a hard time believing that we're all not under surveillance with terrorism and espionage and all,
but
and all the tools they have. I think we're being watched. But whether it's legal or not.
But you see these notes of this John Doe who has been convicted multiple times. And I know someone will write in, we do have dangerous offender legislation in Canada. It's very rarely applied. And it's very difficult to get somebody categorized as a dangerous offender, but they'll say this serial child predator is being released and police believe that there is a high likelihood that he will reoffend.
And then the first thing you think is, why?
Why?
Of course.
And then the second thing you think, and we'll get emails on this, but
and
the
we're
second
letting
thing
him
you think
out
is
at a park.
maybe a bunch of us should
this.
go get shovels and deal with it. And that's obviously not sort of the civilized way of approaching this. But LT, I think, is right in pointing out that it's even worse when society is warned again and again these criminals are re-released and will likely reoffend. Vamp Fashions wonders, why do we care so much about rehabilitation? Some crimes are so heinous that they don't get another chance. They shouldn't get another chance. And
because of what Ryan just said, we don't want those cycles to continue. We want to eradicate that from people. We want to get it out of families and generations of families. Like, I'm not saying everyone could be rehabilitated, but there's a reason for therapy and incarceration. And we've seen the stories. I don't want to quote Netflix, but you've seen the stories of people who go to jail and come out and then they help people and they turn their life around. Of course. And
Guy Felicella. He's been on the show.
Just thinking of him, but I was like, well, has he been to jail? I was trying to recall in my head.
Member.
But people who are on drugs who can help other people get out of addiction, like it's the same thing. These people come out and they can help people. Does everyone do it? No, but that's the goal. That's what we're trying to do, and we have to at least try.
Yeah, and this is kind of where you, Y-Tream's like, it says, Ryan, this is some fucked up shit to admit. To admit what? To admit what? That like serial child sex offenders shouldn't be Are you fucking serious? I get so sick of the bleeding hearts sometimes on this file. It's absolutely deplorable. You talk to any child that has been sexually abused by somebody that was known to police, somebody that's offended before. Don't get me started on the Catholic Church. Don't get me started on any of this. But if you think that the average person doesn't feel very strongly about these types of people being re-released into society, I would suggest you're out of touch. It's completely unacceptable. But politicians can't talk this way.
No.
Politicians can't talk the way that we can talk.
But I think he's talking about the shovel comment.
So?
Which is, because
I didn't say go do it.
But we're just talking about, like, that person was probably abused as well. That person probably had a shitty upbringing. That's what we're trying to root out, right?
100%.
So let's stop that cycle, right?
Yeah, and what's the best way to stop the cycle? That's the question. Like, I have a dear friend who works with the violent offenders. She works with the types of people that I'm describing. She's a mental health professional. She's a counselor. She works with these people in jail all the time. And she and I have she's much smarter than me. She's much more educated in this than me. I think I'm representing the people's perspective on this, and she represents a professional perspective on this. And she's taken me to task before. She said, you can't have these conversations on your show about how these people should be locked up for life and throw away the key, or how these people should be, accidentally let into general population for half an hour and let the inmates sort that sort of thing out. But if you talk to the average person, let's not wait until a family has to have their child's innocence robbed from them forever. Let's not wait until there has to be, a repeat offender released to the public. Remember this? The one in Alberta Beach? We talked about it on the show a couple of years ago. Remember this? The mayor of Alberta Beach was right in here talking to us about it when RCMP brought a violent offender back into the city of Edmonton and just dropped him off. So it wasn't Alberta Beach's problem. Nothing against Alberta Beach. You didn't make the call. RCMP dropped him off in Edmonton. What did he do? 3 hours after he was dropped off, went to Chinatown and violently bludgeoned 2 shop owners to death. Like, what are we waiting for? Justin says, I do think the Canadian justice system is too lenient on violent crime. It 100% is.
Oh, much more.
Tony says we need to address root causes. We need to address root causes, she says. Some people don't change, and they need to be dealt with accordingly, but everybody needs to be accountable for their actions. Alberta Girl says there are people walking among us that should be locked up for sexual abuse. Laws don't protect their victims, so they can't safely press charges. You are totally correct, Alberta Girl. She says there are children left in houses with abusers in Edmonton. I got to be careful what I say next. There's something on my heart that we've not talked about on the show, but gosh, we're reaching the anniversary of a mom that was murdered. Gosh, I'm going to get sued if I talk about this, but there's a mom that was murdered in Edmonton. You know what I'm going to do? I'll bring this up, and then I'm going to sleep on this, and we'll decide whether or not we're going to talk about this more on the show. But there's a mom that was murdered in Edmonton with her children in the house, and her boyfriend at the time, devastated by this, absolutely not involved, and his life destroyed, her children's lives destroyed, his children's lives destroyed, their family unit completely and forever destroyed, and everybody knows who did it. She had a very difficult and terrible relationship with her ex, with the father of her children, and everybody knows who did it. No charges laid, and guess what? Dad has been in care of their kids ever since. The kids have been in care of the dad ever since. So like these, and I know that this is really difficult. This is one that kind of hit home for us. People by association known to us. These things happen, and these things happen more frequently than we recognize. There are like it's true, and this is what there are killers, there are sexual abusers walking among us. I know I'm starting to sound like a sort of like a People's Party political candidate right now. I'm not trying to go there, but in all seriousness, like there are reasons why, and we talk about transit all the time. We talk about downtown neighborhoods. We talk about downtown residency, and the dream of bringing density back to downtown Edmonton. And you look at the developments in Calgary and what's happening there, and what are like the number one reasons why a lot of people don't want to use transit, why they don't want to live downtown, why they don't want to sometimes work downtown. It's because they don't feel safe. And it's because they see stories like this in the news and they don't believe that they're taken seriously. We didn't plan on like getting so deep into this right now. This is banging around in my brain a little bit.
I'm like Homer. I'm back.
That one story, the one story of her murder, and I'm not using her name right now, but she does deserve to be honored and remembered and recognized. But that one story in particular, because the anniversary of her death is upon us this month, and it is so infuriating that the person that everybody knows did it, I guarantee, including her kids, is not only walking free, but is also enjoying some of the I hate to put it this way, but their personal benefits of her not being around anymore. So if you have a thought on this, if this is something that's landing close to home, if your family has been impacted by violent crime, if you've been forced to participate in Canada's justice system, or the legal system as you may call it, and you'd like to share some thoughts with us, you can let us know to talk@ryanjespersen.com. Ms. B is 100% correct on this. Says if anybody's looking for a good charity to donate to, says the Zebra Child Protection Services and Little Warriors Healing Ranch are always really good choices. LT says, Jess, well, that sounds so sad. I don't know the story, but it makes me emotional from you just saying it. I didn't plan on talking about it today, so I'm not quite prepared just to get into it. And obviously there are implications legally. But friends, let me just say, I guess what I'm saying at the end of the day is the show's called Real Talk. And you're probably the same way with your friends or family. Like when I dig in on something, when I really dig in on something, it's typically because it's something that hits home and it's something that I care about. What is it that you care about? We always want to know. We always want to hear from you. There's another amazing group that we're proud to partner with. You want to talk about giving young adults in particular a second chance at life, or in some cases it might be a third chance, but it might be the first chance they've ever been granted. Our friends at UCAN Youth Services do amazing work at ucan.ca. You can check out more about it, including their relentless outreach workers. This is a team of remarkable individuals who stop at nothing to reach out to youth aged 12 to 17, empowering them in making positive, healthy, life-changing decisions. They work in partnership with the Edmonton Police Service. These are the 50 young people 12 to 17 that are most interacting with police, not in a good way. And so the Relentless Outreach Program helps get them back into school or into work, if that's a more appropriate situation. They address poor parent-child relationships, broken homes, peer group factors like gang affiliation, and more. Societal factors, including alienation and poverty, are big on their priority list. You can support this initiative. If what we're talking about is prompting you to contribute in your community, you can make a donation or learn more today by visiting ucan.ca. And I also wanted to mention our friends at Complete Care Restoration. We talk a lot about what's happening in communities that have been impacted by wildfire. Remember, this is the time of year where these fires are going to start again. I hate to say it, but it's a fact. And depending on what spring runoff is looking like, we could see flooding issues. Maybe in your neck of the woods, it's a sewer backup. Friend dealing with that right now. We feel for you, pal. If that is an interruption in your home or business, it's not something you can obviously leave. And it's not something you'll want to tackle yourself without the expertise and the training. Complete Care Restoration's got it with more than 25 years of experience restoring property and rebuilding peace of mind. They've got emergency services available. You can contact them anytime at completecarerestoration.ca. So we chat with Dr. Andy Knight, a political scientist out of the University of Alberta, about why he believes and says and argues that America should be declared a pariah state. This is our April 14th episode. You can check it out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Andy also did recently completed a report at the behest of the Department of National Defense. The Canadian Forces hired him to put together a report about 60 pages on white supremacy in the Canadian Forces. And his comments on his findings, as delivered on Real Talk, lit a fire under a few of you. One of them is going to be in the Flamethrower, featured in the Flamethrower. That's yours, Jonathan. But this one from Don, who writes in from Ottawa. Don, thanks for watching. He says, I just really want to push back hard on your interview with Dr. Knight. He says the Canadian Armed Forces does concentrate on recruiting in rural areas. He says you can read all about it at forces.ca. They've got recruiting centers across the country. He says, but the only one that's really considered like rural adjacent would be Corner Brook, Newfoundland. The rest are in major urban centers. And I would argue that recruiting centers should be in the suburbs where most people live. And he basically argued that one of the reasons why the Canadian Forces is 90% white males is because they've been doing most of their recruiting in rural communities. That's what Don's responding to. He says, well, as for that 90% statistic, white males, he says, while that's not as good as the Canadian Armed Forces would like, he says 3 years ago until now, you can notice a trend in the right direction. He says, we do know that there is a need for targeted retention efforts. He says within the Canadian Forces, we aim to have about 25% women, more than 3% Indigenous peoples, which would be an improvement of the population representation now. And he says, and more than 10% representation by visible minority groups by 2026. He says overall representation of these designated groups does remain lower than desired. Right? He says we're about 10% off on women, we're about a half a point off on Indigenous members, and we're about a percentage point off when it comes to visible minority groups. He says, so coupled with a lack of rural kids, a focus on urban recruitment, and an openness to further diversity, the Canadian Armed Forces is not a cesspool of white dominance, as your guest was arguing for. For what it's worth, Don, he never said that, but I'll take your point. Don says, back in the 1990s when I joined, sure. He says, but that was 35 years ago. And he says, and as for peacekeeping, the Canadian Armed Forces has not deployed a large peacekeeping force since the Balkans in the 90s. And we fought a pitched battle there with the Croats in Medic. He says, peacekeeping is a cash cow now for third world nations. And Canada really only sends command and comms support for the few missions that remain. Canadians need to get over this peacekeeping myth because it glosses over the need for combat-capable forces to face that dangerous new world that we are facing today. Did I send you that Mark Carney clip on Canadian Armed Forces? Do we have that one? Why don't we roll it? He wants to be Prime Minister, obviously, after April 28th. And Mark Carney is saying that Canada will make that investment. Here's his promise.
We won't only bring the Canadian Armed Forces up to today's standards. We will also build a military that is ready to fight threats that Canada is facing, and we will protect Canadians now and into the future.
So that's Mark Carney. When I watched that, you want to know what I was honestly feeling? My very first thought there is Carney making that promise, and this is where I think that the Conservatives are trying to sink their teeth in. But it was like the question that immediately came to mind is, this is the party. Now, I acknowledge Mark Carney was not the leader, Mark Carney not the Prime Minister, but this is the party that had the last 10 years to do exactly that. Right? He's saying we will build back the forces. We will further invest in the forces, and obviously reflecting changing dynamic between Canada and the United States.
Yeah.
But the Liberals were in power for the last 10 years and didn't do it.
It didn't get done at all. Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know if that's going to land with people or not. Real Talkers, let us know what you think. If you're watching this on YouTube after the fact, leave a comment. We do our best to respond to as many as we can. And if your comment's fiery enough and sharp, if you really hit the nail on the head, we're including YouTube comments now in the Flamethrower, our final episode of every week, presented by our friends at the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. As we wrap, I do want to remind you that registration is now open for the Real Talk Golf Classic. You can check out the events link on our website. That's RyanJespersen.com to learn more about it. It's a 2:15 shotgun start at the Ranch Golf and Country Club again on the 19th of June, all in support of the Real Talk Julie Rohr Scholarship. Send us an email, leave a comment on our socials, or tell your friends about what we were talking about on Real Talk today. The more involved in the conversation, the better. We'll chat with you tomorrow.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jespersen, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harman Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjespersen.com.